Hello and welcome to Policy and Politics with me, Tarun Nangia. The topic we discussed today has going to certainly have an impact on the discussions and the deliberations in the future. The topic being one nation and one election. Of course, this has been an oft, discussed idea in the political circles, more so because India is in election mode all through the year. We know there is some or the other election going on in every state every 2 months or so. But is this idea practical and legally tenable, and other aspects to understand? And to understand this issue, I have with me a very eminent panel. I have with me Justice Arjun Kumar Sikri, who served as judge of the Supreme Court and is an eminent arbitrator. I have with me Parag Tripathi, senior advocate, also has served as the Additional Solicitor General of India. I have with me Mr. Raian Karanjawala. He is managing partner of Karanjawala and Company, one of India's, in a sense, busiest and biggest litigation law firms. I would like to welcome all of you to Policy and Politics, and especially thank all three of you for sparing your time and making it together. I couldn't have had a better panel. But to start with the round of opening comments, I'll invite Mr. Karanjawala to lay the ground, and then we can take off on this subject, as they say.
So, Tarun, on this aspect of one nation, one election, the first thing that we have to remember is it's not new to India. The first four general elections, 1952, 1957, 1962, 1967, were all fought on that same principle. We've, of course, come a long way from there, because today, on an average, it is calculated that every year there are between, including obviously the state elections, there are between 5 to 7 elections every year. The question is, which is the better way forward, or which is the better course to go towards? Now, there's a lot to be said on both sides. First, let me put it in favor of the proposition, one nation, one election. The advantage of that is as follows. One, over a period of 5 years, a considerable amount of cost will be curtailed, because elections have a cost to being held. So a considerable amount of cost will be curtailed. That's the first point. The second point is that with 5 to 7 elections every year, what happens is that the model code is in place for large parts of every year, as a result of which certain development activities are curtailed. Therefore, again, going back to one nation, one election, you will have a much easier time in administering the country. The third thing is that every election brings forth a sort of a bitterly contested dynamic between different political parties. And that sort of tends to bring forward and in the forefront the difficulties, the disparities, the divergencies of our society. So now the question you have to ask yourself is, do you really want to have a situation where all through the year, somewhere or the other, there is some bickering going on, as we can see at the moment. There is some bickering going on in some part of the country or the other in the context of an impending election. So these are the advantages of this one nation, one election thing. The disadvantage of that, according to me, is just this, and this is often my worry. You see, if you were to have one nation, one election, then you would have, in 10 years, only 2 days on which the nation went forward, pressed a button and went home again. Now, what happens in every election? What does every political party, every election commission say? In fact, my friend Naveen Chavla even wrote a book on it, saying every vote counts. So what do they all say every time elections come forward? The first thing they say is, come out in large numbers and vote. Now, people come out in large numbers and vote only if they are in the habit of doing that. People must be in the habit, people must be inculcated and kept in the habit of participating in a democracy. That's the advantage of several elections, because people then tend to treasure what the election gives them. The advantage of several elections also is that it is like a steam pressure, it's like a steam cooker letting out steam. A lot of pent-up frustration, anger comes out in the election, and then things again tend to calm down. Otherwise, it might just get bottled up for too long. So this is what I think. I certainly think this is a matter which requires a deep debate and a detailed discussion.
So basically, you've put your points, but said that this requires a much deeper debate. I will like Mr. Tripathi to take this forward, and then Justice Sikri to give his opinion on what he thinks about, in a sense, the points made by both our panelists.
Yeah, you see, I think perhaps the title of the debate, which has been going on, as Ryan rightly said, for several years, requires a little tweaking. It should really be one democracy, one election. Nationhood has really nothing to do with elections. As we see around India itself, we have two very interesting neighbors. One of them is very powerful. They really hardly have their nations, yes, but really speaking, there are no election mechanism there. It's not just merely a question of semantics. It's important because in a democracy, election has an important role, but only a limited role. The role is of the appointment process of those who are going to be in power, and they will do the governance. The real purpose of democracy is that you choose the people who will do governance through elections, and then they do governance. That is the key. Now, the problem with having, as Ryan said, that every year you have 5 to 7 elections, the whole nation is on an election mode, is that there is a complete diversion and distraction from governance. If the party which is in power in the center, say, does badly in some state election, immediately the opposition will say, well, you have lost the mandate. And the reverse if it does well. But really speaking, democracy is not about who wins and loses an election only. That is only a starting point. Therefore, there has to be this focus on governance and not a focus on election. That's very important, because otherwise the dharma of democracy, and election has to fit into that dharma, is that once a party wins, then for 5 years, subject only to no confidence, it has every right and indeed every duty to do governance. The opposition cannot and must not interfere. And likewise, the flip side of the dharma is it can't be the answer of a party in power to say, we won the election. There has to be an audit on governance. That audit gets completely thrown out of the window when we are in a perpetual mode of elections every year. And as what we're seeing, the whole nation gets glued on. Now, this time, there was even an election in a municipal corporation, which became national news. Now, of course, it's important, but now look at the way the media deals with it. There was an election, there were results, of course, there were interesting results, but has anybody taken it forward and said, look, these were the issues which were facing even that municipal corporation. This is the way forward. That is missing altogether, because the moment that election is over, now there'll be another election. So you will, your focus is, it's like what is called a classic grasshopper mind. The nation's mind becomes a grasshopper mind. This election, next election, next election. It's like a person who is hooked onto some medicine or drugs, that I want my next shot. So the whole nation wants the next shot. And Ryan made a very important point, that elections, though it's a very important part of the whole democratic process, has an element of divisiveness. Because in election, what do I have to say? Don't vote for Ryan, don't vote for his party, vote for me and my party. And then I will set out why he is bad for the nation, and he'll set out why I'm bad for the nation. And then we'll look at who are the people supporting us, and we'll try to make an issue out of it, which will again move away from the national imperative and the national debate and the national picture, which has to be all focused to governance. And a classic example is Singapore, where Justice Sikri has had an association with that country. They have their elections. I'll just say they have their elections. But look at the way they have focused on governance. And look at what Singapore is today and what Singapore was there 45 years ago. So I think that is the key. That is the important key.
I really like the distillate of what I can take out from Mr. Tripathi's points, that a lot of focus on politics, but not on governance issues, even in the media. We move from political issue to political issue without actually talking about governance issues. A very important point indeed. I'll go across to Justice Sikri. So what do you think about the points made by the two panelists and your analysis of that?
Yeah, Tarun, as you have heard both Ryan and Parag, Of course, Ryan set the pace and said that, look, insofar as simultaneous elections are concerned, it is not a new phenomena. First four general elections, along with that, the state elections took place. And in very clear term, Parag has also betted for this one election, although he has tweaked it very appropriately and ideally, that look, it is not a question of nation, it's a question of democracy. Now, thing is that on the one hand, it is very clear, ideally, I mean, if we say the textbook example, if it has to be, and on papers, it is that one nation, one election, or one democracy, one election sounds well. The question is, as Ryan also pointed out in the beginning when he told pros and cons of this, whether it is achievable. We have to keep in mind two or three things, and then we have to, yeah, if we can, for this ideal situation, I mean, kind of scenario where the elections can be simultaneous, we have to have ideal situation also, ideal background also, because that it has to be in on the keeping in view the ground realities here. Now, why after this 1967 this was disrupted? That has to be kept in mind. And what is the politics today? Now, it was because of 2-3 reasons, if I may say so. They were in that time, if you see between 1967 and 69, etc., there were many state governments which were toppled, UP, Punjab, Haryana, mid-term in the sense, and even Punjab, UP, Haryana, West Bengal, etc. Then in 1969, that Congress split which took place, and immediately thereafter Bangladesh elections, Bangladesh war between India and Pakistan and Bangladesh was created, and the parliament was dissolved and fresh elections were announced. So therefore it led to different dates for state elections as well as the elections at the center. And thereafter, we did not have the occasion to go back to a position or a situation where there could be one elections. Now, Parag talked of democracy, yes, and the governance, which is very, very important. But democracy also implies other things. Once a particular election takes place and the government comes in power, which any political party which forms a government, as he also rightly pointed out, it has a right to go for 5 years. Now, when we are having these elections at different places, how to synchronize and how to bring about a situation today that all these elections take place at the same time? Are we going to suppose some in the state elections, say, which were held 2 years ago, 1 year ago, or 3 years ago, that their term should be curtailed? And suppose we want to have, with next general election in 2024, all state assembly elections also. So can we then create a situation there that all state assemblies would be completing their 5 years term in 2024, which is not possible? So how to have this kind of situation? Another thing which is very, very important is, and which has to be kept in mind, and again, right, I mean, democratic right of people to elect, etc. And it again depends on that as well, that we have seen in last 20, 30 years. Earlier, if I say so, and I compare with that, in first 4 elections, it was Congress which was in power in most of the states also, and center also. And it started happening, what I told you, when the other political parties started assuming powers at the in the state government, and 356 imposed, and all those things which were happening, even misuse of 356 which had happened, and so many cases ended up in the court. Now, the question is that once the regional parties, there's a mushroom of regional parties who may not have any national presence, they may not have any presence beyond their state. There are some which may have presence in 2 or 3 states, some they have no presence beyond their state. But the question is, if they are able to form government, which it has happened in past in their particular state, that means the people elected them. So they are powerful, or they are at least liked in their own constituency. So whether we can take away their rights. Now, all these issues are very, very important issues which have to be said, as Raian also said, that it needs a very, deep debate and a very intimate debate on all these issues. And so therefore, question is, when we talk of federalism, when we talk that the states have also their own rights, whether the center can impose such things, or whether the national parties only who come in power at the center will have their influence in the state when the elections are held simultaneously. So all these issues are there. Of course, I again say that if it can be, ideally, yes, it is good on papers, one nation, one election, with which we started, this nation started, and it will always be a good thing. But then we have to create ideal conditions for those as well.
I'll go across to Mr. Karanjawala. If it were to happen that all state assemblies have to pass this because it would be a constitution amendment, do you think it becomes all the more difficult?
No, I mean, it can't be passed unless the attributes of a constitutional amendment are gone through. So, I mean, of course, it's not easy, but sometimes you might be able to sort of cobble up a majority and get it done. The question that Justice Sikri also hinted at, and which is the important question, is this: that all right, so today you have an election, and then every government is elected for 5 years. Midway through in a particular state, a state is sought to be toppled, as has happened in recent times. States have got toppled, states have been sought to be toppled. And you topple the state government after 2 years. Then what happens? Are you going to keep it in abeyance for 3 years? How are you going to do it? Then don't you come into a mismatch? So what people have suggested, you see, these are, as I told you, Tarun, this is at the thinking stage and at the debating stage. So what people have suggested is that if a state government gets toppled, say, after 2 years, then you have another election. But that election is only for the balance of 3 years. That election is not for the whole term.
Okay.
The other suggestion people have made is that, all right, the state, you bring a vote of confidence to topple the government. But you can't bring a vote of no confidence unless you also bring a vote of confidence. Like it happened in IK Gujral and Devgoda IK Gujral. So they knocked out Devgoda, but IK Gujral became from the same party, then the prime minister.
Okay.
So something like that. Now these are all legal. These are bristling with legal issues.
I'll request Mr. Parag Tripathi to take your 2 points forward, and if you could analyze for us, what do you think about state assemblies passing it, and of course the question of if a state government topples after 2 years, would that lead to a vacuum in governance?
Yeah, I think these are both very important questions, and I agree with Raian that it's a matter in progress. It's the debate is far from, the final bell is far from rung on this debate. You see, the constitution scheme is very clear, and the relevant articles are 83 and 172 for the parliament and the state legislative assemblies. And it says for 5 years, and then adds these ominous words, and no longer, both for parliament and the legislative assembly. Justice Sikri very rightly put the pragmatic aspect on the forefront because it's very important. Assume that, yes, we should have one democracy, one election. How do we go about it? So we have to reach this base zero. That is where everything happens together. That's one big problem because right now it's all over the place. Some assemblies are getting over, say, prior to 24, some will get after 24. And surely, unless there's a constitutional amendment, there is no way to ensure that they will all adhere to the new base zero. The second problem is how to maintain base zero. Because once you reach base zero, then how do you maintain that every 5 years that all the assemblies and the parliament go to election together? And for that, Raian had suggested that one way out is that, well, once you are able to reach base zero, whichever way, then you say that if there is a fresh election anywhere, it will be for the balance of the term. Like what happens, for instance, for a membership which becomes vacant in the Rajya Sabha. The new membership is for the balance of the term. So this is there. There was one more aspect I wanted to say, which is sometimes used as an argument against the need to have one democracy, one election. My principal reason for supporting it is really that it leads to the focus which democracy needs and democracy is all about, that is good governance. Too many elections, or even more than one election, in my view, in 5 years, moves you away from it. It completely creates a series of problems where democracy's focus gets distracted. So one argument sometimes which is used is that, well, you may lose the real benefit of democracy, which is to have a rainbow of governments, different colors, different hues in different states and the center. And you will have a monochromatic government. Whichever is the wave moving, that wave will rule. But India has shown it every time, including in the last election, that Indian voter, despite poverty, despite illiteracy, knows exactly, the little man, when he goes to the little box, he knows exactly whom to vote. And he factors in that, well, for parliament, I'll vote for you, but for my state assembly, I won't. So I think, really speaking, I get the sense that the panel is entirely appreciative of one democracy, one election. The problem is, as Justice Sikri pointed out, how exactly do you go about it? And I think, yes, it would require either a general political consensus, which is, of course, purely theoretical, it never happens, or a constitutional amendment, because there also you need political consensus, but that is, as Raian pointed out, that can be achieved. It is achievable within the realm of achievability.
Okay, these are two important points put by Mr. Tripathi. I'll go across to Justice Sikri. Sir, if there is thing, if a government falls after 4 years, then should you have a whole state election just for 1 year? And how right would be that? And secondly, any such issue is definitely going to land at the doors of the court. So do you think that it's not so easy to put such reforms in India, or any such thing which would, in a sense, would in a sense for the states be a very difficult thing to swallow, is what it is being said?
You see, one thing is there, and what we have been watching in last few years, the way the politics is going on, any step taken by any government, I'm not talking about the government in power today, but previous government also, any step taken in any direction, whether it is good or bad, it has to be criticized by the other side, the other political parties, etc. And that has become a norm. I'm talking of now practical difficulties in that sense. Now it has become a norm. So therefore, the question is, any idea which is mooted, how well it will be received. I'm on political consensus, whether there will be a political consensus on that. Now, let me tell you, insofar as parties, which are localized parties or regional parties are concerned, for them, it may become, as I said earlier, also a matter of concern, because there was one very interesting policy, this is public policy think tank, IDFC. It has undertaken a study as per which, if the elections held simultaneously at both the state and the center, although, as Parag has rightly pointed out, that the voters are intelligent, they know, and it has also happened that many times, even in the same elections, when in some states, for some states and general election, if they have same time, they have voted maybe one national party insofar as center is concerned, but regional party when it comes to the state election. But having said so, the IDFC study will go for same party.
Okay.
So therefore, and to this extent is the study of IIM also, Ahmedabad. Now, if that is the study, this is that maybe the regional parties may not like it. They may say that, look, national party may take away this. Of course, we have seen, like example in Delhi only in even in 2014 and 2019 elections, where in the general elections, BJP came and won all the seats in Delhi as far as MPs are concerned. But in this legislative assembly election, our party won. Within few months thereafter, elections were held, and it was so that to that extent he may be right. But then, in spite of this, these examples are there, but still there would be some kind of say doubts in the minds of regional parties whether they come forward or not. And when it comes to the, maybe let us presume that at national level, parties, etc., they all agree and the motion is there. then as I said, that normally everything is opposed and everything is challenged also nowadays. Everything lands up in the Supreme Court, whatever legislation is passed, whatever action is taken by any government. So therefore, here the question would be, one would be the procedural formalities in bringing out the amendments. Amendments are not only in would be in Article 83, 172, 173, etc., but even Article 368, which talks 322 of Election Commission, 368 also, which talks of the amending powers of the such a amendment which is to be made has to be backed by it has to be approved by the legislative assemblies also in respective states. To what extent it happens, one doesn't know. That is one. Another problem would be, I don't know, but a very interesting, which I have seen the people have started discussing about it, that since we are a federal country and it's a federalism in this country, and right to free and fair election is a part of basic structure of the constitution, that is in Keshwananda Bharati, the Supreme Court has already held so. So whether imposing this kind of this thing, whether it will offend the concept of federalism when regional parties would be diluted, etc. So such a debate may erupt. So on that ground, whether such an amendment can be carried out or not. Of course, I don't find much substance in that, personally speaking, because when it was there in the beginning, and logistically or even conceptually, there's nothing wrong about having one democracy, one election. But all these issues would arise. And to how far it would depend upon now our Prime Minister Modi. He has batted for it. In 2019 elections, it was in the manifesto of BJP also. And he has said about few days ago, again, he has talked about it. So it would depend upon the leadership of the political party in power and Mr. Modi again, how he will be able to bring about all the political parties and political think tanks together, that and to tell them the benefits of it. And there are pros and cons, as we know, but I feel that yes, benefits are more, as is stated by the other two speakers also. I think all of us in the panel feel that if it can be achieved, it will be ideal.
Okay, so on this note, I think we'll end our part one. We will revisit this issue in another 12 weeks, because this issue, as they say, is moving thick and fast. Elections are up in Bengal, as they say. We can all see in the news. And in a sense, this issue is going to gain momentum, is what we sense, because as none less than the Prime Minister himself said it. Mr. Karanjawala, you had a point?
Yes, I just want to take a minute if I can.
Yes.
I think that the Sikri has made a very deep and penetrating point by pointing out these two studies which show that if in real terms, the advantage only goes to the central parties if you have one nation, one election. That is something that certainly the regional parties will have to think about, because in a sense, it does affect their ability to, handle their own politics. And this is a very deep point which has also been brought, at least according to me, for the first time into the debate. And it's a very important.
Okay. So we'll take this up in the next part on this after about 12 weeks. But I'd like to thank Justice Sikri, Senior Advocate Parag Tripathi, and Mr. Karanjawala for, in a sense, giving us their time today for recording Policy and Politics. I hope viewers enjoyed this episode. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you.
And Tarun, before we go, all of us should wish Parag all the best for tomorrow. It's his birthday.
Wishing you a very happy birthday.
And happy Christmas and New Year, which is coming.
To all of you. Take care.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.